When we contemplate the afterlife, our minds often drift to two familiar destinations, the finality of heaven and hell, or the fleeting, brilliant light described by those who have returned from the brink of death. But what if this is a false choice? What if the journey beyond the veil is not a leap into an unknown void, but a structured, predictable passage, a spiritual landscape with laws, geographies, and distinct territories that can be mapped? In the early 20th century, one man claimed to have drawn this map. His name was Rudolf Steiner. He was not a priest nor a simple storyteller. He was a philosopher, an architect, a scientist of the unseen, a figure so paradoxical that while his schools and agricultural methods thrive to this day, his most profound work remains a guarded secret. Steiner asserted that through disciplined, clairvoyant perception, he could read the blueprint of the soul's journey after death, a journey with distinct stages, karmic laws, and even a cosmic geography. But here is where the investigation truly begins. The map he described bears an uncanny resemblance to the spiritual landscapes charted by Tibetan sages in the Bardo Thodol, the Book of the Dead, and the celestial realms documented by the 18th century scientific genius turned mystic, Emanuel Swedenborg. This is not a story about one man's belief. It is an investigation into a pattern, a chilling possibility that these explorers of consciousness, separated by centuries and cultures, were not inventing fantasies. They were all drawing different sections of the same hidden continent of reality. Steiner's work doesn't just ask us to reconsider death. It presents a detailed travel guide to what comes next, forcing a question we can no longer ignore. What if the path home has been charted all along? To understand the map, we must first understand the cartographer. Rudolf Steiner was not a man easily dismissed. Born in the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1861, his mind was a rare fusion of scientific rigor and profound spiritual vision. He was a respected scholar of Goethe's scientific works, a philosopher steeped in German idealism, a man who moved with ease through the highest intellectual circles of Europe. He did not operate in the shadowy world of seances and theatrics. Instead, he approached the spiritual world as a scientist approaches a new frontier, with meticulous observation, systematic classification, and a demand for clarity. From a young age, Steiner claimed to perceive the spiritual world not as a dream or a metaphor, but as an objective reality, interwoven with our own. He spoke of conversing with souls and sensing the subtle architecture of the cosmos with the same certainty an astronomer speaks of distant galaxies. Many of his contemporaries, grounded in the rising tide of materialism, labeled him a charlatan or a madman, but a strange problem emerged for the skeptics. His ideas worked. The Waldorf schools, built upon his model of spiritual human development, became a global success. His principles of biodynamic agriculture, which treated the farm as a living, cosmic organism, yielded results that baffle modern agronomists. His insights into medicine and architecture were decades ahead of their time. He wasn't a guru demanding faith. He was an investigator presenting his findings. He insisted that the ability to perceive these higher realities was not a gift, but a latent human capacity that could be developed through disciplined inner work. He was, in essence, a methodological mystic, and when this unique mind turned its full attention to the ultimate human question, what happens when we die, he did not return with comforting platitudes. He returned with a blueprint. What made Steiner so unsettling to the scientific establishment was that he refused to play by their rules, yet he used their language. He spoke of karma not as a religious belief, but as an immutable law of moral physics, as real as gravity. He described the evolution of consciousness with the same precision that a biologist describes the evolution of a species. He was not anti-science. He argued that science had simply stopped too soon. It had mastered the physical world, but remained blind to the subtler causal realities that underpinned it. His challenge was radical. The instruments for perceiving the spiritual world were not telescopes or microscopes, but the refined and disciplined human consciousness itself. This is why he attracted not just mystics, but also doctors, artists, and thinkers who felt the growing emptiness of a purely materialistic worldview. They saw in him a bridge builder, a man who could walk in both worlds and translate the timeless wisdom of the soul into the intellectual currency of the modern age. He claimed his clairvoyance was not a passive seeing of ghosts, but an active, willed journey into what he called the Akashic Record, a cosmic library where every thought, emotion, and event in history is imprinted. From this source, he claimed, He drew his map of the soul's journey. A map he insisted anyone could learn to read, if only they were willing to undertake the rigorous and often painful training of the self. This was not a gift of grace. It was the next step in human evolution. The first step across the threshold, according to Steiner, is not into light or darkness, but into a mirror. Immediately after death, the soul separates from the physical body, but it remains tethered to a panoramic memory of the life just lived. For a few days, it experiences a perfect, vivid replay of every moment, every choice, every sensation. But this is only a prelude. The soul then enters a state Steiner called Kamaloka, a Sanskrit term meaning place of desire. Here, the true purification begins. It is not a judgment from an external God, but an encounter with the raw, unvarnished truth of one's own actions. Imagine you remember a moment you caused someone pain, a harsh word, a selfish act. In Kamaloka, you do not simply recall it. You are forced to experience it from the other side. You feel the sting of your own words in your heart. You feel the ache of the sorrow you inflicted, as if it were your own. Every wound you ever dealt to another, you now experience firsthand. This is not punishment. It is a profound, inescapable lesson in empathy. The soul is cleansed not by fire, but by understanding. And here, the map of Steiner begins to align with the others. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, this exact state is described. The consciousness of the deceased encounters the mirror of karma, where every good and evil deed is reflected back not as a memory, but as a living experience. The soul becomes its own judge, jury, and witness. Centuries earlier, Emanuel Swedenborg, the Swedish scientist, described a similar realm in his spiritual diaries. He called it the world of spirits, an intermediate state where souls, stripped of all pretense, are drawn to others of a similar nature and are forced to confront the true quality of the love or malice that drove them in life. 3 different explorers, 3 different eras, one chillingly consistent description. The first stage of the afterlife is an incorruptible mirror, a place where you are not judged for who you pretended to be, but are purified by the reality of who you truly were. Steiner explains why this empathetic reversal is a metaphysical necessity. During life, our desires and passions are directed outward, projected onto the world. When we hurt someone, the initial impulse of anger or greed finds its release and then fades from our immediate experience. But the impulse itself, the spiritual energy of that act, does not vanish. After death, without a physical body to direct these energies outward, they collapse inward upon the soul. The desire that once drove the hand to strike now has nowhere to go but back to its source. The soul is forced to consume its own creations. This is the logic of Kamaloka. Every echo must eventually return to the voice that made it. This process is what the ancients called the shedding of the lower self. The Bardo Therdol describes it as the confrontation with the wrathful deities, which are not external demons, but terrifying personifications of the soul's own unresolved passions and karmic debts. Swedenborg called it the removal of external loves, the masks of civility and social standing we wear, until only the soul's ruling love, its true innermost desire, is revealed. All 3 maps agree on this fundamental principle. To ascend to higher spiritual realms, the soul must first become weightless. It must detach itself from the heavy, unpurified desires and earthly illusions it still clings to. This painful confrontation is not a cosmic cruelty. It is an act of liberation. It is the soul untangling itself from the temporary identity of a single lifetime in preparation for the journey home. If this first stage of the journey is a mirror reflecting our past, the next stage reveals the blueprint of our future. After the soul is purified in Kamaloka, according to Steiner, it begins a vast, cosmic ascent. It journeys through realms of consciousness associated with the moon, Mercury, Venus, and the sun, shedding layers of its earthly personality at each stage, becoming progressively lighter, freer, more universal. But it is what happens at the zenith of this journey that changes everything. Steiner stated that between incarnations, in a state of enlightened panoramic consciousness, the soul meets with higher spiritual guides. There, it reviews not just the life it just left, but the entire tapestry of its karmic journey. And with the wisdom of this higher perspective, it makes a conscious choice. It writes the script for its next life. The soul itself, in collaboration with these beings, chooses the time, the place, and the family of its next birth. It chooses the fundamental challenges, the core lessons, and even the souls it will encounter. The difficult parent, the challenging spouse, the enemy who betrays you, the child who teaches you unconditional love. These are not random encounters. They are appointments. They are souls with whom we have made a pre-incarnate agreement to help each other learn and grow. This single idea dismantles our entire understanding of fate and suffering. If Steiner is right, there are no victims in the universe. There is no injustice. There is only curriculum. The hardships we face are not punishments, but the very lessons our own, higher self knew we needed to master. And once again, the other maps echo this staggering concept. The great philosopher Plato, in his Myth of describes the exact same process. Souls in the afterlife, after witnessing the cosmic order, are brought before the fates and choose their own next life, their own destiny, from a selection of available patterns. The implication is almost too vast to hold. The life you are living right now is not an accident. It is a mission you assign to yourself. The question is no longer, why is this happening to me? The question becomes, what did I intend to learn from this? This concept of a self-authored life re-enchants the world. It suggests that the universe is not a cold, indifferent machine, but a sacred theater where we are the actors, directors, and playwrights of our own grand drama. Consider the people in your life. The bond with a loved one is no longer just a product of chemistry and circumstance. It is the continuation of a conversation that has spanned lifetimes. The profound, inexplicable connection you feel with a soulmate is the recognition of a fellow traveler with whom you have journeyed through countless cosmic ages. And what of our deepest wounds, the betrayals that shatter us, the losses that leave us hollow? From this higher perspective, these are not tragedies to be endured, but sacred contracts fulfilled. Perhaps the soul who agreed to play the role of your antagonist did so out of the deepest love, knowing that only through that specific challenge could your own spirit develop the strength and compassion it sought. This transforms forgiveness. It is no longer a moral duty, but an act of profound recognition. To forgive someone is to acknowledge the role their soul agreed to play in your curriculum. It is to release them from their contract with gratitude for the lesson, no matter how painful the performance. This is the ultimate accountability. We cannot blame our parents, our society, or God for the circumstances of our life. The script was approved by us. Free will is not the ability to avoid the challenges, but the freedom to choose how we perform the role we have written for ourselves, with grace, with anger, with courage, or with despair. Every moment becomes a test, not of our endurance, but of our memory, a chance to awaken to the purpose we ourselves have set. As the soul completes its ascent through the planetary spheres, it approaches a threshold. Steiner, Swedenborg, and the Tibetan texts all describe this as a journey into pure, undifferentiated light, a return to the source of all being. Here, the individual I begins to dissolve. The memories, personality, and identity of the past life fade like a drop of ink in an infinite ocean of consciousness. The soul enters a state of cosmic midnight, a silent, blissful union with the creative intelligence of the universe. It is a state of being, not of doing. A state of knowing, not of thinking. And it is here that the maps fall silent. The language of human experience, born of duality and separation, collapses when it tries to contain this state of absolute unity. Steiner, for all his meticulous detail, describes this ultimate reality with only the most reverent and abstract of terms: the world of spirit, the realm of archetypes. He speaks of a music of the spheres, a cosmic harmony that the soul hears and becomes part of, but it is a sound that cannot be transcribed into earthly notes. Swedenborg, the encyclopedic cataloguer of the heavens, simply calls this state the divine, a presence so overwhelming that lesser beings cannot endure its direct light. The Bardo Thodol calls it the clear light of reality, a state of pure, primordial mind. It instructs the soul of the deceased to merge with this light, to recognize it as its own true nature. But it warns that for most souls, the sheer intensity of this absolute reality is terrifying, causing them to recoil back towards the familiar realms of form and individuality. This is the ultimate mystery. The explorers of consciousness can lead us to the edge of the abyss, but they cannot describe the view. They can only report that there is a point where the journey of the individual ends and the life of the cosmos begins. A truth so profound, it can only be experienced, never explained. This silence of the mystics is not a failure of description. It is the most accurate description possible. Our entire reality is built on separation, I am separate from you. The past is separate from the future. An object is separate from the space around it. Our language is a tool designed exclusively to navigate this world of distinctions. But in this state of cosmic unity, all separation ceases. There is no I to observe a that. There is no sequence of events, no before and after, only a timeless, eternal now. There is no subject and no object. There is only being. To apply a word to this reality is to immediately create a boundary where none exists, and is therefore to lie. This is the ultimate dark night of the soul in reverse, not an absence of light, but an absence of shadow. In this state, the soul does not learn facts. It merges with the very logic of the cosmos. It understands the intricate, unspoken grammar that holds reality together. It experiences firsthand the reasons for karma, the necessity of suffering, and the eternal nature of love. It is from this summit of absolute clarity that the soul, before beginning its descent back into form, gains the wisdom to co-author its next incarnation. The choice is made not from a place of ignorance or desire, but from a place of perfect knowledge. The silence at the heart of the universe is not empty. It is the womb from which all purpose is born. If these maps, drawn by different explorers across millennia, point to the same fundamental reality, why are they not the cornerstone of our civilization? Why is this knowledge treated not as sacred inheritance, but as esoteric fantasy? Steiner provided an answer. It was not just a prediction, it was a warning. He asserted that humanity's evolution would face a powerful counterforce, a being of immense intelligence whose goal was to sever the connection between humanity and the spiritual world. He called this being Ahriman. This is not the simple devil of religious folklore. Ahriman would not come with horns and a pitchfork, demanding our souls. He would come as a benefactor, a reformer, a scientist. He would speak the language of logic, efficiency, and progress. His philosophy would be simple and seductive. That consciousness is merely a biochemical reaction in the brain. That the soul is a primitive superstition. That what cannot be measured, quantified, and replicated by a machine does not exist. He would offer a universe stripped of all mystery, all meaning, all purpose, a perfect, sterile, predictable machine. Ahriman's triumph, Steiner warned, would be to convince humanity that the material world is the only world. He would build a civilization of brilliant intellects who are spiritually blind, a world where humans become so entangled in technology and data that they forget how to feel, how to intuit, and how to look within. Mainstream science, in its attempt to dismiss the evidence of the soul, becomes the unwitting instrument of this paradigm. Near-death experiences are reduced to oxygen deprivation in a dying brain. The accounts of children remembering past lives are dismissed as fantasy. The profound synchronicities of our lives are explained away as mere coincidence. But these explanations always fail to account for the critical data, the patient with no brain activity who accurately describes the surgical tools on the operating table, the child who knows the names of a W-2 fighter pilot's entire crew, the mathematical improbability of a life-altering coincidence. The barrier to this knowledge is not a lack of evidence. It is a worldview that has decided in advance that such evidence cannot be possible. We are living in the age Steiner foresaw, an age of Ahrimanic intelligence, where the lie is not a passionate falsehood, but a cold, logical, and soul-crushing truth. This Ahrimanic influence is not a conspiracy orchestrated from the shadows. It is a consciousness that permeates our modern world, masquerading as common sense. It is the voice that whispers that your intuition is just a chemical imbalance. It is the cultural pressure to define your worth by your productivity, your possessions, and your digital footprint. It is the allure of virtual realities that are more vibrant and compelling than the inner world of the soul. It is the endless stream of information that keeps the mind perpetually busy, ensuring it never has the silence required to hear the heart. Ahriman's greatest weapon is distraction. He seeks to create a world so loud, so fast, and so full of fascinating superficial data that the very idea of a deep, inner life becomes absurd. The journey inward is reframed as a waste of time, a neurotic indulgence, when there is a world of external problems to solve and digital worlds to conquer. This is why the maps of Steiner, Swedenborg, and the Tibetan sages are not just ignored, they are perceived as dangerous. They suggest that the ultimate reality is not out there to be controlled by technology, but in here, to be discovered through self-mastery. They propose that the most important journey is not to the stars, but into the silent cosmos within. In a world enchanted by Ahriman, this is the ultimate heresy. It is a rebellion against the paradigm of external solutions. The resistance to this knowledge is not just intellectual, it is a deep systemic fear of what we might find if we ever truly looked in the mirror. Now that you have seen the outlines of these maps, you cannot unsee them. They present a profound choice. Not a choice to believe or disbelieve, but a choice of how to perceive. We can continue to navigate our lives as if they were a random sequence of events in a meaningless universe, a brief spark of consciousness between two voids. Or we can choose to live as if the map is real, to treat every encounter as an appointment, every challenge as a lesson, every intuitive whisper as a message from our own higher self. We can begin the inner work of observation, of self-honesty, of trying to perceive the spiritual reality that flows unseen, just beneath the surface of our world. This is not about blind faith. It is about adopting a new, more profound hypothesis for your own existence and testing it in the laboratory of your own life. If what Steiner, Swedenborg, and the ancient sages described is true, then we are not bodies that possess a soul. We are immortal souls temporarily inhabiting and animating a physical form. This single idea, if taken seriously, dissolves the fear of death and imbues every moment of life with an eternal significance. The great exploration is not out there among the stars. It has always been and will always be within. If this investigation resonates with the questions you've been asking, subscribe to continue the great exploration. This concludes our inquiry for now, a synthesis of documented evidence from disparate mystical traditions and timeless philosophical questions, all grounded in the sources that guide our journey. What echo did this story awaken in you?